if she exists. To the Organisational Performance and Audit Committee meeting. Nice to actually have us all in the building and in a 3D kind of a carbon-based form. Welcome. Apologies. We don't have one from Councillor Cook, which I think is a bit unusual. But he is? Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Somebody like to move the apology? Thanks, Councillor McPhail. Second, Chairman Horrell. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Thank you. Declarations of interest. Haven't been notified of any. Thank you. Public forum petitions, deputations. I'm everywhere. I haven't been made aware of any of those. Thank you. Confirmation of minutes of the 29th of April. Anything from those? Thank you, Councillor McCallum. Second, Councillor McPhail. Any comments or discussion on those? Fabulous. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, that takes us to notification of extraordinary or urgent business. Haven't been notified of any of that either. And before we go any further, I just, if you're referring to any papers and any of your comments or questions, can you please use the page number that's in the middle at the bottom? Just so that if there's supplementary reports or anything that have got other numbers, we don't get too confused and we don't have to shuffle too much. And the other thing I wanted to check was that you had all received the supplementary civic finance services papers that were put into Objective Connect yesterday. If you don't have them, Mel has got some paper copies if you need one, so just give me a wave if you do. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we got to questions and I haven't had any notification of those either, so we'll keep moving. Number 8, Chairman and Councillors' reports. Do we have any relevant councillors' reports? Great, excellent progress. Number 9, General Manager's Corporate Services Report. Item 1, the financial report. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting to be here in person. So we have a financial report for the month of April, a full lockdown month. Hopefully the only one we're going to have in our history. I will focus on, as I often do, on the operating surplus line and talk about how we are tracking for the year, and then discuss the investment part, which is very volatile still, and then move on. For the month, the contractors' operational expenses are below budget. You might have noticed by some $400,000 in total. Again, not unexpected given that we were all working from home, and although some work could continue, obviously not everything that was budgeted would continue. If we look at the year-end forecast, we're still forecasting a negative $8.5 million in operating deficit. It's very similar to the previous forecast that you've seen, against the original budget of minus $6 million, or an operating deficit of $6 million. So not a substantial change, in fact, there over that time. Extraordinary expenses relating to floods is still being determined. At our best, the number in there is our best estimate. We're looking at in excess of a $5 million event, and we're still compiling all the claims to the various parties. We're pretty confident with our claims, but it could be within 102 of them, depending on whether they agree. We're doing our best to get those through so that they're back in time when we are doing our final audit. The big movement in the month is, in fact, in the investment portfolio. As much as it went down, it is coming back. The month of April saw a total increase there at $1.4 million. And we were forecasting then that we would be within a couple of $100,000 of original budget. In fact, a big change from the March result. On the 24th of March, we were at our lowest point in the investment portfolio. Subsequently, the month of May has seen another increase, and we're now forecasting, if we were to write this document today, that we will be on budget for the investment portfolio, realised and unrealised, so dividends and interest plus a capital movement. The forecast then that's shown at the bottom here of 2.9 million, if I was writing that today, I would suggest to you that that's going to be between 2 and 2.5 now, if things don't change in the next 19 days. So before I move on, Chair, are there any questions on?
Councillor Bedwood, did you have a question? Were you waiting?
I did have a question. I wasn't up exactly about that. It was more later on. I had a question regarding the taxation.
Yeah, that will come to that. Remind me though, please. Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ignore the investment income because that'll do what it does. I understand that. Is there any concern or risk around within the expenses within the organisation that are effectively concerning the finance team or need addressing before the end of the year? Obviously, the budget and the contractors and consultants is going to be up on the original budget. We can understand most of that, but is there anything else in there that we need to be aware of now or going forward that would need more of a focus on? Because it's only a very small chunky item, what you've given us compared to what you see for the formal spreadsheet.
Council, I think we had quite a discussion in the March workshop, I think, on this, and I would suggest that things haven't altered from that. There's still the items that we were discussing then, including consent appeals, is that the only item that I would raise as being one that we have no control over. One particular consent appeal continues on. Went through some budgets with some people yesterday, and I think that these are conservative. We may come in under these numbers, not necessarily in that category, but across the board, I'm hoping that. Yeah, I think that this is the top end, but we don't know until we'll come in. If we look at the fact that we've currently got a $1.4 million surplus and we're forecasting a $2.5 million loss, you would wonder how we get there in a month. But I've checked back, and last year we did exactly the same. It's that final leg. So it is difficult for us as a finance team to see, but that we have asked. Twice asked.
Pick up on that because I think that's what Tony's raised is quite important. Last year we spent some time around the contracts consultants trying to understand the flow, not necessarily the numbers, but the flow and how it seemed to be very tail heavy, fourth quarter heavy. And we tried to bring that forward and push the organisation to have more up to date, regular payments. So we didn't have these last quarter surprises. So I suppose my question really is, has it helped? Has it worked? Do we need to do some more area and that in similar areas? Because the fourth quarter, you're quite right, and I've seen that from many cycles now, the fourth quarter throws up stuff that we didn't expect, or the magnitude was greater than we thought.
I'm trusting that we now expect it and we're forecasting it. How to change that, I'm not sure, but we do have quite a lot of communication with the staff around their workflows and their budgets, so I think everybody's doing what they can.
Jim Hall.
Yes, Madam Chair, just looking at the drawdowns over the last couple of years and the one going forward, I guess I'm conscious that we did have a one-off, I guess, with the waste tuna funding. If we were to fund that land purchase over a longer term, would that actually free up some of that money that's gone out? It's been prudent to actually had it out with the volatility, but we've gone 2 million, 7 million, 3 million. So it was, part of the budget that was certainly some aberrations in there, and I guess just thinking about something that's a longer term thing, that how it will be handled going forward.
Councillor, are you talking about the next item?
Yeah.
I might have jumped over to the investment thing.
Yeah.
IMF is probably here. Sorry. Yeah.
I've got to finish the balance sheet here. So on the balance sheet, page 14, you'll note that the trade receivables are 5.185 million. At the 30th of April, we were still outstanding a single transaction of 1.85 million from a NFP. That has been received. Of course, that threw out all our numbers at the time. And in the accruals, we were also outstanding $1.7 million for a land transaction, which is subsequently received, and the balance is insurance accrual. So quite chunky numbers, but they have most of them come in. You'll see in the cash flow, we are hoping that the insurance will start to come in the new insurance and cost recoveries will come in the new year. Cash flow, I think, is fairly self-evident, reflects where we are and have been. You can see the withdrawal of the managed funds and the debtors and trade receivables analysis. And, we have corrected a little aberration last month with the analysis there. Looking back at this report last year, the rates debtors were 1.26 million, so we are a little bit slower at 200,000. We would normally in April have sent out a substantial number of, well, those remaining would have gone to the debt collector. We chose not to do this obviously in April this year. We have just last week sent out gentle reminders from ourselves, and we will start to see the effects of that in the next couple of weeks, and after that we will make a decision then as to how we progress with that. So a bit slower, but not massively slow. It would normally come down by November to around the 700,000 or 800,000 with the processes that we follow. Within the 1 month there, that 2.6 was the outstanding amount from MV that's been received. So it should start to look better next actually in the June report, because some of that money came in on the 1st of June, sadly. That would be the end of that report. If there's
Thanks, Tony. Does that answer your
Well, it does.
question?
Yeah. I just looked at the aging rate the last month. There seemed to be numbers in the current now not in 1 month.
some gremlin came in with a lot there.
Thanks. Somebody like to move that recommendation, please? Thank you, Councillor Beard. Seconded, Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item number 2. Thanks, Tanya.
So page 17, summary of performance. I'll start actually with the word paragraph summary. We were asked to clarify a little bit last time about the withdrawal of funds. So what we're suggesting here is the portfolio increased 1.4 million. A missing word, subsequent cash withdrawal of 500,000 leaves an increase of 911,000 a month. What we're showing in that table is that how that increase comes about, and if you're interested, you'll see large changes in the capital value or the market value. The dividends and interest received for the month, 99,809 for the year. Forecast for the next financial year for the dividends and interest received was 650, and I think 590 is what we're going to have in the budget. At today's date, the portfolio total is 24.3 million. 25.3 million. Another large increase in the month of May. Any questions on this report?
So, Harold, does that answer your previous question?
Next
Next item.
So next, yeah,
Apologies. Getting ahead of myself. That's Councillor McCullum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tony, I wasn't just quite clear. I'm linking the next paper into this paper. You've actually asked for some money to be withdrawn, and you've laid that out. But you've got the 500,000 sitting in here. I wasn't too sure whether that was on top of or part of.
That happened in April.
So the next paper is a subsequent.
500,000, councillor, was part of the 7 million. We had to end up 6.5.
Anything else? Somebody like to move that vote, please? Thank you. Councillor McCallum, seconded. Councillor Laurel, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item number 3. Finally. Thanks, Tanya, again.
This paper is prepared in advance, I suppose, to indicate to the council that with the cash flows projected in here, we will have a cash flow deficit for the financial year of $3 million as we achieve the budget as it's stated in here. What we're suggesting is that we would like approval from the committee to draw down that money throughout the year as required both by the cash flow and recommended by our advisors, rather than necessarily come to the committee for a particular meeting at a particular time, given the speed and the volatility of things that we're asking for the authorisation to draw down that $3 million, as I say, based on the cash flow and recommendations from our advisors. It may be August, it may be October.
Questions?
Okay. So I presume, Tony, that you're asking to do this as and when it is appropriate for the, and you'll just report what you've done to that amount as it happens, so you can track it.
So in the SIPO agreement, we have to ask for permission for drawdowns from the investment portfolio.
Bruce?
Yeah, sorry, just if I just clarify, Tanya, so we're looking at the reduction of term investment of 3 million. Did I hear you say you're going to draw down over the year? Or in one hit? It's showing one hit.
It is shown in one hit. It's shown in one hit because we haven't defined the actual month, but we expect that we will draw it down within that period because that's a period we're in overdraft.
Sorry, I was just trying to clarify. Perhaps I wasn't listening correctly. The investment advice is to draw down in one go or over a period of time?
The investment advice just at this point is if we need the funds, it's a good time to withdraw them.
Oh, at that point. Yes, okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to cover that off, so they are suggesting that, in a general sense, obviously equity is better in terms of it generates greater returns. However, with equity comes a whole lot of risks about when you want to withdraw those funds. They're suggesting that now, at the present point in time, equity has moved and it's in a moderate position. So to be starting to signal that through to them so then they can be making those funds available, pulling some out of equity, but rather than maybe leaving it and then being driven by timing requirements to pull it out and suffering whatever losses might be happening depending on where the equity markets are.
You'll put in the cash, basically.
Yeah, so I guess this here is there are a few unknowns on that cash flow. We've had the conversation about what's going to happen with regards to our rates, the fact that we're maybe allowing people to go into direct debit and that might sort of slow some of that rate income. So this is, I guess we're signalling that there's net cash flow deficit over the year. We're not quite sure when we're best going to need to withdraw those funds based on some of those other variables that are at play. Certainly, as Tony said, the advice that we're getting from JB is that signalling it sooner is better. Listen to that guy.
Councillor McLean.
Seems I went blank.
Just a couple of questions in regards to what is our overdraft limit? How much?
So we traditionally set up a limit of 15 mil, but then we have discussed that around the table. There's been a level of comfort going into 10 mil overdraft, and I think there's probably a bit of a feeling that going beyond that is starting to we maybe have more ingrained debt or long-term debt that we're not acknowledging. So, given that when we get our 15 or sort of 16 or whatever mil of rates, that if we go much more than that, we probably need to acknowledge there's longer debt there. It's not a working capital issue.
I suppose business as usual has changed a bit. Everybody's got a bit more debt, and we could utilise it more. Just in regards to, it could be a good time. Nobody knows what market's going to do.
Yep.
But I'm still not always a fan of debt and taking money out of the equity or out of the that has been traditionally performing better than the interest rate.
Yeah, and that's the critical point.
Yeah, but if they're recommending that, we're not throwing. You're recommending that you may need it somewhere along the track. Unfortunately, this says it's all coming out this one month. Well, they could draw it down, but it'll be sitting in not necessarily coming into our overdraft.
Yeah, not necessarily. We need to. It is preferable if we signal it to them and then they hold it into cash. So they'll hold it in term deposit until we're ready to draw it down.
So I'm just trying to get my head around that. Utilising the overdraft more. What is the interest rates?
Yeah, so the overdraft interest rate is 2.13.
Yeah.
So it's quite low.
Yeah.
But then when you look at what we know about our fixed interest, which is 50% of our portfolio, our fixed interest return is less than 1%. So there are risks. Where things are at the moment. Having money sitting in our portfolio, carrying some risk, earning, whatever it might be, but we only know that 50% of it's only going to earn less than 1%. It seems suitable or prudent to be putting that into our overdraft rather than leaving it sitting in the investment portfolio.
That's working on the theory whether you're going to make 2% on it. That's that's the risk.
Yeah.
But then again, who knows whatever Trump decides to do, we'll follow the way really. But we can draw that down though. We can utilise overdraft to take. We've got capacity in the overdraft to be able to run the business. It could be pushed out further to make that decision. Further down, we can draw down the money. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah, we could. The only thing that I would signal there is that if we get to a situation that we're in need of it, and we don't have time to take it out at a opportune time, then we will suffer, or we run the risk of suffering greater losses. So our what we're after here is to signal it to the to JB Ware and then give them the opportunity to move it into the term deposit, into their cash management space at a time that, based on their expertise, that when they think it's one. And so so we with fixed interest, they're all on contracts. So that's part of the reason why the 500k of that 7 mil come through late, because that was on a contract that expired in April. So if we broke the contract, that would have incurred penalty fees and what have you. So giving them longer time to withdraw the funds is better.
Thank you. Oh, yep. Sorry. Yep,
Can I
Jane.
just add to that I suppose there's a principle here and around our financial strategy, and that is we're recognising that this is a permanent drawdown because of the loss of the income on the marine fee. So effectively we're talking about drawing down on the marine reserve. And the suggestion is that is effectively how we're going to be funding that piece of work. Okay, so what we're talking about here is using our reserves rather than going into debt.
Thanks.
So rather to get away from the discussion of using it, which month is better than what other month. We're talking about the philosophy of actually using our own reserves versus using debt to fund that part of the operation.
Thanks, Tony. I've got Nicole and Lloyd and maybe Councillor McFarlane again. Maybe.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think we've got investment advisors. I think we need to take their advice. Let's probably a fair view out there that the equity markets have bounced back a little too fast and a little too quick, and the reality sets in that we may see another round of volatility. And again, as points have already been made, giving them time to actually do the drawing down, I think it's good. Going forward, if you can always reinvest if we don't use it, but I think we've got advisors and we should take their advice, so I support the item.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Councillor McPhail. No, not Councillor McPhail, Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I suppose I come at this from a slightly different perspective because it's very easy to use your overdraft facilities and actually build up hardcore debt. So the graph on page 23 tells a story for me, and that is how long are you going to be in debt, how long are you going to be credit for? And I think we need to look at the numbers. To me, are a little bit secondary. It's about how much time we spend in credit, and it's suggesting 5 to 6 months, and half that time, the other half is spent with about maybe 7 months in deficit. I think our financial planning has to sit around that sort of perspective, and then we put the overdraft facilities or other accounting systems around that to actually look after that cash flow analysis. So I understand what Councillor McPhail is saying. It may be prudent to take some targeted borrowings at times, but that, to me, tells me I need to make sure my cash flow is correct and those other things fit around it.
So interested to note that incorporates the 3 mil drawdown.
Yes.
So that's our end result if we do that 3 mil drawdown rather than, so if we didn't do it, that situation.
If we're trading off that graph, and that graph to me is too important to go away from what we would say is good business practice around how much time we spend in debt, which is a tool, and how much time we spend in credit.
Thank you. Councillor McPhail, do you have a question?
Yes, just to
You
clarify
can have a question.
that is this money coming out of the Marines Reserve? Specifically, the Marines Reserve is going to be.
I
Just see that start. I want to know where the money's coming from.
it's representative of this, the principle is what I'm trying to say is that we use our reserves. And the forecast is suggesting that the income to Marine Reserve will be down. And of course we don't know that, but we're suggesting, and that's all we know at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Beard, last one, please.
Yeah, so just probably the overdraft at the end of the day, we'll be sitting there and have those insurance claims being put through. So those projections of 1,750,000, they are reasonably firm, or are they still estimates?
Tanya, can you answer?
Well, we think they're firm, but they've not been agreed. They're in process, most of them, one yet 700,000 yet to be completed. So a lot of work to do to get a claim.
So they could still lag a little if
They could lag, yes. We've no experience with how long they take. I mean, the first one was a very small one and it turned around okay, but that was before COVID. Our COVID claim is very small compared to some of the other councils, which is multi-millions of dollars. So we're in line now with the insurance company, with anyone. We certainly, as I said, you might see in another report, we have one person who's 0.75, 3/4 of her time that's working on the claims, along with the catchment staff. We're currently reanalysing their claims so that we can, because each of the parties we're involved with has a different way of reviewing the claims. So we put a claim into there and then we reanalyse it to see if we can claim in that one. It's a workshop for another day.
Thanks, Tanya. That's
so just the end of May back, overdraft position, will we, how are we looking at the end of May?
Well, I can't remember the end of May, but as at today, we're just over positive.
Right. So with their opening cash of 4.7 million overdrawn, we're
20th of July, effectively it's that balance. So we're expecting that trading month of June to come through as forecast. And so effectively 20th of July after credit June. That's our best estimate at this point.
Thank you, Councillor McCallum. Seconder, thanks, Bruce. Just to note that that's to note the report and to approve the drawdown of up to 3 million in funds from the New Zealand portfolio. support that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Want that recorded, councillor McPhail?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Item 4, adoption of the reviewed fraud and corruption policy. Thanks, Tanya.
So I'll talk to this. Councillors, well, some councillors will recall July of last year, we brought through a fraud policy. And that was partly driven by the fact that it was timely to revamp the policy, but also it was something that was picked up by our auditors, that our fraud policy needed to be revised. Subsequent to that, I got some feedback from this committee. Also got from Bruce Robertson some guidance from the Justice Department in how to complete a fraud and corruption policy. And one of the pieces of feedback that we got from the auditors is that our policy was a little bit too narrow and it didn't cover off corruption. So rather than actually revising or editing our existing policy, I've gone back to the drawing board and written a new policy, which I've tabled here. Keen for obviously council feedback. I will say I tabled this policy with executive on Monday and have a couple of edits that I'd like to get approval for as well. And the first one being that on page 129, under the second lot of bullet points on the investigation, sort of setting out what the experience is around the investigation, there was a suggestion by the executive that when we, if the investigation substantiates fraudulent or corrupt activities have occurred, the chief executive will issue reports to appropriate designated personnel and, if appropriate, to police. So add the police in here.
Sorry, Neil, which page are you on?
Sorry, page 29.
Thank you.
So basically halfway, the fourth of the second lot of bullet points.
Thank you.
So
Everybody got that?
in the investigation, I guess the amendment that we want to make is add the police as one of the possible parties that we involve in the investigation. And that the reason being that Serious Fraud Office and the Office of the Auditor General might be dealing with significant fraudulent activity, but there may be more lower level fraudulent activity that we still want a police investigation. So it's just to make sure that it covered the full gambit. And then the other addition is at the top of that page, so where it says the person or persons appointed by the chief executive to conduct the investigation will have, and then there's all those bullet points. We want to add one that sort of, rather than talking about the functional access that they will have, we want to talk about the character of the person and what, and so in terms of the type of person that the chief executive should appoint to do that work. So we're wanting to add in a bullet point saying the appropriate levels of independence, objectivity and investigative skills, including the creation of evidential and criminal files as required.
Does anybody need to hear that again?
I was going to write it down.
Sorry, I get excited.
Would you just like to
talk a bit faster?
Yeah, would you just like to run through that again because it's quite long?
So as I say, at the top, under the persons appointed by the chief executive to conduct the investigation will have the appropriate levels of independence, objectivity, and investigative skills, including the creation of evidential and criminal files as required. So it's a bit of a skills-based role, and these are the skills and or attributes that we'd expect of the person to conduct this work. So apologies for those amendments, but happy to take questions on the policy.
Bruce?
Nothing Don did show. I just wondered, and this is always trouble defining things, Neil. Go back to section 3 on page 27. First bullet point: disclosing confidential and proprietary information outside parties equals fraud. I wondered about that. it's wrong. I think it's probably covered in our code of conduct. I hope it will be covered in our code of conduct. I just wonder whether it constituted fraud
I'm pretty confident that that's verbatim
from out of the.
from the Justice Department's work.
So that's, I'm not in any way saying this council, my experience with other councils, most confidential information leaves the council. No, a good amount of it leaves it through the hands of elected members.
So
So all I'm just trying to draw a line here is that we are saying that if one of us here was to release confidential information, we could be up for a challenge that we are fraudulent.
yeah, so I would suggest, so if you read the first sentence, so fraud encompasses a wide range of criminal conduct involving deliberate deception in order to receive unfair, unjustified or unlawful gain.
Okay.
So the principle of unlawful gain would have to apply. So you have to be, so if you're going to release information to get something, that's when it becomes, I believe that's when it becomes fraudulent rather than a mishap or, so I think that's.
You mean financial gain?
It doesn't have to be financial.
Political gain?
Could be political. Well, the political gain, if you read the corruption definition, there's a lot about political gain in there.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's fine. It's fair enough. I mean, I think perhaps I'm just drawing reference to the fact that actually it comes in a number of places, but actually we are putting our I guess what our colours to the mast, that actually if confidential information was to leave the organisation, we would see it as potentially fraudulent activity. What a high test. Okay, that's cool.
If someone's doing it to benefit.
Can I most would release to benefit. I think that's my point. That's why I say about the political gain, not just the financial gain. Most people will leak because they think it's advantageous or to their position. Yeah, okay. Hey, and look, the other thing under incident reporting under item 7 on page 28, you have in the appendix the reference to the Disclosures Act. I must confess, I just would, Disclosures Act, sorry, I just wondered whether it would have been better if we also draw a direct reference to it here in section 7.
Yep.
In other words, the whistleblower. I think it's can be a big thing for an employee who perceives on good grounds that there is fraud.
Yep.
And I think we would want to encourage an employee to blow the whistle if they have good cause.
So
all I'm just trying to think of is, have we got a strong enough connection here that incident reporting doesn't have to be under the particular.
So you have look at the last sentence, Bruce. It does say the employee reports wrongdoing will be protected.
I read too fast, didn't I? Not all the sections. Yeah.
So I guess if you check in on that and make sure that you're happy that that is representative of what you were seeking.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm glad to see it. Sorry. Yes.
No problem. It's never a waste of time. Councillor McCallum.
Just clarify, because there's absolute fraud or corruption, and that's fine. But sometimes people will raise the question saying, "I don't know. I'd like somebody to have a look to make sure this is correct." So does that actually protect people, or is it just to make sure that our systems and processes right? Because somebody can come in from an outside organisation and say, it's a little bit different than I've seen before. Can we just check that out? Because I know what the intent is, but their behaviour is a little bit different than I've seen in other organisations. So it's not, because this report basically goes to the extreme that there is absolute fraud or corruption or some other thing. But in that middle ground, there's actually opportunity for people to ask for clarification around systems or processes or actions by individuals.
So you're asking if someone is, I'm trying to understand the point in terms of if someone feels uncomfortable about an action, that there's a, rather than going down this path and raising you just to challenge the process. And
so instance, let's say I work for somebody else, I come in here and I go, gee, that's unusual. We never did it like that. Why would I do that? So do I go step up to the next highest person and say, could you could you give me some confidence that that system and process is actually correct without instigating a full scale report? So
Yeah, but so keep in mind that this is, you think someone is benefiting, you know, from an unlawful act. So that's when this here kicks in. It's not that, you know, you think the process is a bit clunky or could be done better, or, you know, may have some risk. You know, even if you think, look, that process, you know, might not be as robust as it could be. I'm concerned that it's got some risk. You know, again, we'd encourage all staff to challenge processes
under continuous
improvement. This here is, you know, there's something that seems not quite right here. There is something dodgy going on, and I think, you know, there's a bit of guidance around what, you know, incident identification in terms of, you know, there might be some of those factors at play that might alert someone to the fact that there is something fraudulent going on.
that's fine.
Just to remind you that the recommendation is that we have reviewed the full policy and we are resolving to adopt it. Just somebody want to move?
I'm happy to move that with the 2 amendments that has been pointed out by Neil.
Thank you, Councillor McCallum. Seconder, please. Thank you, Bruce. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 5.
Thank you. Item 5 is, I'll talk to this. This is an administrative item. It's, I guess it's in our delegations that any commitment in excess of $300,000, as long as it's represented in our LTP, we can sign that off, but we need to report it back to the council at the next meeting, and that's what we're endeavouring to do here. You'll understand that this here is a commitment in terms of we've signed up to the letter of arrangement with the auditors. It's not an invoice or an order as such, but because it is a legal commitment, we've tabled it. It's useful to note that the fee that the auditors have tabled in their proposal is consistent, reasonably consistent with what it has been in the previous years. We have had conversations with them about, you know, there's an expectation because they are supposed to, they would otherwise be on site, but they are doing their work remotely. So we do have an expectation that there'll be some savings and disbursements under what is covered off in their letter.
Councillor Beard and then Councillor McLeod.
Yeah, so was that a tender process, or have we used Deloitte's for a number of years and we'll look to use them for the 3?
The Office of the Auditor General is the entity that is required to do the work, and they choose Deloitte's. In some places, you either get, I think it's either the Auditor General or you get Deloitte's. So Deloitte's their partner that can provide the service. So there isn't we don't have a lot of say. We have had conversations about the fee and you know, seeking to try and reduce the fee. And I guess it's a little bit, you know, and you'll see in here that they are not fully recovering their time, and, you know, again, so we are working on trying to make the whole process easier and better so that they can recover their time and we can reduce our fee. Whether or not that's attainable, I'm not sure, but it's certainly our aspiration because it's a lot of money.
Councillor McLeod.
Exactly the same question I was going to ask. I just wanted to know. It was quite interesting, the 2 letters, that one proposes to use them and the other one has appointed them. They're on the same day. So I think there's typos. I don't know. I don't mean I just used one. 2 letters.
Yeah. Sorry, I would say that, and Tanya might want to chip in as well. From our experience, they are very good. We get a fair discussion. They aren't, you know, we've got to be careful what I say about auditors here, Bruce, but you know, they treat us fairly. I'm not sure that all of our peers are treated in the same way, so we're reasonably happy with who we've got, and we look over the fence and say, thank goodness we haven't got them.
Thank you. Councillor
I'll make comment and then I'm happy to move. But the process for me over the years that I've been here has got better and better. In some years it hasn't been that good, and they've done a lot of work. I think our systems are getting better, and I think your comments around understand what the auditors want and presenting in a way that is transparent and clear helps everybody. So for that, those comments, mine, I'm happy to move.
I'll just get you to hold on to that because Councillor Hall would like to say something. So we're Bruce.
Yes, well, I guess I have
We're moving along.
triannual growth about the service. We have to have, they're projecting their costs going up by at least 2% a year, and the overhead of British ex-mates is even higher when you look at it. So I guess we have to accept it, but when you talk about the divestments, etc., might be slightly lower. It's always good to have a bit of chip at these people. They're doing a good job, but it is a captive market, and in this day and age where everybody's been told post-COVID to keep your rises to a minimum, something like this should be following that example.
Yep. So the Office of the Auditor General did write a letter putting guidance out to setting an expectation that there shouldn't be any undue rises, but that had, in terms of percentage rises, but then it also left the opportunity that if you're having to do more work, you can recover that more work. So I think we're being very fairly treated by Deloitte, and Deloitte had written to us and given this to us prior to the Office of the Auditor General. So it was a your prices aren't going to go up unless they have to do more work. So it was. So I think I'm a penny pincher. I think we're being treated reasonably fairly.
Thank you, Bruce.
Yeah, look, Neil, just one thing really follows on from the fee is that, of course, this is sort of almost like if you do this, we'll do this, and it'll all go swimmingly. So under section 7 on page 49, they put out their assumptions about their fee, largely their assumptions about how we will perform. So a combination, particularly this year post-COVID, recognises a 3-year fee. Is anything there that we should be worried about? Is it reasonable for them to assume that we can deliver?
Without going through line by line, I don't believe so. So they are commencing the first phase of the audit now. We've put a lot of information up into Objective, and they are working remotely on that. So there's nothing that I know, and I'm looking at Tania, there's nothing that we're aware of at this point in time which we think would compromise their ability to do their job. COVID being what it was, I think even with regards to completion of the annual report, yes, there are challenges, and not the least that we've got LTPs and a whole lot of other work programs, but there's nothing that we're concerned about at this point in time.
Good. Thank you.
Right. Can we go back to your moving that motion then? Thank you, Councillor McCallum. Seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 6. Civic Financial Services Limited Annual Report.
So hopefully everyone recalls Civic Financial Services as a CCO. We need to bring through their annual report every year, and you would have seen the statement of intent. The purpose of today's meeting is, I guess, reflection on their annual general meeting, and it's to see whether we wish to attend. I think we are, I'm not sure if it's in the report, but I think we're about a 0.2%. 0.09% shareholder, so we guess this has to be taken with taken into context. But as a CCO, we've got these requirements to report, and we've got opportunities to provide our view and to have a vote. So if anyone doesn't have any questions about Select Financial Services, may I suggest that we look more at the document that was sent out yesterday, which is the notice of the meeting, which sets up the proxy questions and the questions for their agenda. And if Council can give us advice on how you would like us to complete that, and whether you'd like to send someone or devote a proxy.
Neil, can I just check that they are still talking about a Zoom meeting for that, or they're not? Is it actually going to be?
I believe it is still is, I think they are still proposing to Zoom. Yes.
Fabulous. Questions, comment, particularly on that extra
I'm
document?
quite, because of their very large holding, I'm actually quite happy, and I didn't see anything in here that would say the kind of number scheduled with for proxy to the chairman of the meeting. There's nothing in here that really comes up and down. The accounts are audited. Quite happy that system process just followed through.
That's one part, and then I guess the other part is, do you wish to complete the proxy and instruct if you give them the delegation, we can still instruct the chairman on how to vote?
Unless you have a reason, quite frankly, we don't have the full knowledge of that business to the extent that I would have a strong view one way or the other. The chairman has a really good indication of what goes on in a meeting. So you either trust the chairman or you have a very strong view to the opposite. So I'm probably trusting the chairman. I'm saying I've got no reason to think otherwise.
Thank you. Bruce, then Councillor McFarlane and Councillor Beard.
I just want to perhaps move just slightly one step away from the actual document. How many of our staff make use of their services? What we think of here is our 0.09% is in some sense now, given the change in sort of financial services, to having a shareholding in a company which actually looks after the long-term interests of our staff. I mean, arguably in the long run, if it was particularly contentious, it would be nice to know their views. But do you know how many of our staff do?
I don't. We have had that information previous, and I guess it's fair to say there is a significant investment in terms of staff's superannuation schemes held by financial services.
Which is a critical thing for us to remember. That actually, it's not just
that's
being governance,
value.
where they're actually doing stuff for our staff, which we should be concerned about. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Jeremy?
I was just going to ask, Neil, in regards to this, is there anything that stands out here that you are concerned with?
No, I don't have any reservations. I did look at the Christchurch City Council. I think Christchurch City Council proposal with challenging whether or not they pay a dividend. I see the purpose of the entity to protect staff superannuation schemes, and if they are able to provide a lesser cost of doing that because they're not having to pay a dividend, then fine. I don't think our shareholding, or probably any other council shareholding, is there to generate a revenue stream or return. So my only thought was that I thought that was, I would have, my personal view is that I don't agree with what the Christchurch City Council is suggesting.
Thank you. Does that answer that question? Yep.
Yeah.
Councillor Beard?
Yeah, so having read that supplementary piece of information, I tend to think that unless there's a reason for the entity needing more capital, and that they haven't paid dividends, so whether there's the difference in the rates would make the business more secure, I would support that. The amendment, or that Christchurch City is looking to put forward to be voted down. I think we should keep the fees lower, and that will benefit the staff here and around the country.
Councillor Horrell?
Yes, I mean, we are at a very small fry in this. Just interesting that where the challenges are coming from. Chief Executive Tony Merritt was, I think, Christchurch CEO at one stage of it. He's had a wee bit of a checkered career. That I don't think we haven't got enough information or a big enough influence to really follow that up. I'm quite happy with the status quo.
Okay, so can we just clarify what we actually need to do first here, Neil?
So just back to what Councillor Cullum suggested are, there's two parts. If we select the chairman as the proxy, that would be one part, and then the second part would be we either go through these list of questions and put our votes down, so that's to instruct our proxy how to vote, or alternatively we can take Lloyd's position and just say we'll vote with the chairman, and that will meet Alan's point, because the chairman is
indicated,
they've indicated their position on the point that you raised. Sorry for that.
Yep, yes. So,
it's probably more straightforward to just leave it with the chair.
yeah, I think.
So did Lloyd move
So-
in that direction?
Do you want to do that as one?
I'm happy to do that, but I was trying to give the meeting some guidance. This is quite simple. The shareholders know everything looks like it's following a normal course. I don't have any reason to go against that, so let's just make it as simple and easy as we can.
Yeah, and I think the feeling of the meeting is fairly obvious. Isn't it? So are you moving both of those recommendations?
I'm happy to do so.
Thank you. Seconder, please.
Second.
Thanks, Councillor Beard. So that's both those recommendations. Is that clear? Yep. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. Right, item 7.
So, Madam Chair, just to clarify that, we've effectively taken out appoint the XXX to delegate,
Yes.
taken that piece out, and we start really just sort of chair services.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, is that right? Item 7 is the Clean Air Lines quarterly report. Do we have Joe?
So I'll cover the top and hopefully be supported if any questions arise. Again, this is the quarterly report that comes through 4 times a year, funnily enough. There's not a great.
Taking a glass of water.
So I'm providing a great deal of insight into this report. So look, I guess I'll just leave the report as read. There's not a great deal of change to the report. The only point that I thought was interesting to note is with the Gore District Council, if you have a look at their quarterly report, we have forwarded 400,000 to them, of which there's $349 left on the funds that we've contributed to. Well, in fact, sorry, the other way around is, sorry, that's right, $349 left. So there may be a call upon us in the near term if they continue to, subject to how much more they put out before the other ones get paid. So neither of the Gore District Council or ICC have indicated any concerns with arrears.
That's good. The only comment I would make is that our friends at the Invercargill City Council are charging their admin fee at 3.95. As far as I'm aware, most interest rates for a personal loan are far less than that. So I just thought I would draw that to your attention, and also perhaps the conversation we had yesterday regarding some discussions in the Strategy and Policy Committee to have a closer look at the clean air loans process and procedure rather than the accounting side of it. So I think that probably will come up in that discussion, but I just wanted to raise that. Councillor Horrell.
And I guess because it is a risk going forward, I think we need to have a broader conversation going forward on whether the loan scheme is going to achieve our goals. We probably need to find out the records of non-compliant burners, etc. And I think we probably need to move to a more targeted approach going forward. But we're seeing a fairly flat line as far as this initiative goes. It's been won, but I don't think we're going to actually reach our objectives without perhaps looking at being a bit more targeted and having a look at that. And we should be able to find out who is non-compliant and let's make that approach.
Certainly some of the conversation that can happen in that Strategy and Policy Committee report space, I think, because there's lots of anomalies and it's maybe not as effective as it might be. Any other questions?
So just clarify, are you suggesting that it's reviewed, the whole process of review through strategy? So do you want a resolution to that effect from you?
Well, I raised it yesterday at strategy and policies, so.
No, I think they were waiting for a directive. We would need to actually signal to them to actually have a review of this, because this report here only notes, we're noting a report of financial well-being within a system. So the report's fine, there's nothing in here that's out of the ordinary. We note where the levels are for the sums. The comment that the chairman's raised and you raised yesterday at another meeting were the fact that you are suggesting, and I'm not disagreeing, we'd like to look at the total policy again to make sure it's fit for purpose and meeting our objectives as we go forward. There's new guidance from the government coming down to us, so we need to understand that, and we may need to make some tweaks through the system. I would suggest that we have a recommendation that this go to review for strategy and policy.
Sure.
And that way we actually are completing the loop within our system. We've got clear guidelines, and then that'll come back to full council for consideration in due time.
Everybody else happy with that? So somebody magically make words for.
Well, I think it's quite simple that OPAC asked the strategy and policy to review the clean air loan policy.
Pretty okay with that?
It's something as simple as that. We don't want to make it too, we just review it.
It's fairly
Then we
clear,
take it
okay.
from there.
I'm happy to second that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. Right, so we still need to do the
I'm happy to move the report is for noting as on the paper.
thank you. Second, please. Thank you. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried, thank you. Item 8, the long-term plan progress report.
So for this item, I actually asked for committee's approval to withdraw this item. It hasn't, for various reasons, it hasn't had the level of rigour and scrutiny that we would have hoped, and there are a few errors in it. So for that reason, I'd like to pull it and bring it back to the next council meeting.
Oh, okay. Any comment, question?
I agree that reading through the stuff in there, I expect to see it's not there. So let staff get us an update and bring it back in due time.
Thank you. Do we need a resolution in there?
No, because he's withdrawn the paper, so
Yep.
I think I'm right.
Yep.
Withdraw the paper, the paper's opposite.
Thank you. Item 9, annual activity plan. Neil.
Standard report, with noting we're at the end of the year, I guess, essentially. So we'll set one up again for the next 12 months. Acknowledging though that we there are opportunities to revise this report and do that in conjunction with moving to a quarterly financial and quarterly risk report. But until we sort of have done that piece of work, I just want to roll this through as it is. A couple of points I'll cover off. In fact, just remind me when we spoke about the fraud and corruption policy, I should have mentioned there was also a webinar from the Serious Fraud Office, and they talked about the 4 critical policies that an organisation should have in place to protect it against fraud, and one being procurement, one being conflict of interest, which we've renewed both of those recently, the other one being the fraud and corruption, which obviously you've just signed off, and the fourth one being the gifts policy. So we have completed a gifts policy. That's at a management policy level. Well, when I say we have completed, draft has gone through to exec. There's final sign-off going through to this exec on Monday. So, so we've done that work on the policies, and that's sort of leading into so where we're at with regards to the other policy that's signalled there is a sensitive expenditure policy. That's going to be done next. So it's underway, but I guess the gift policy and then the alignment back up with some of our other internal policies took precedence. The other item that point that I'd make is that we've spoken to the auditor, and the auditor was, it did indicate that he was happy to come to either this meeting or the meeting in July, which is before they kind of kick off the audit. That's the pre-audit meeting. Given that we wanted to have our workshop this afternoon, I suggested that we'll put that off through to July. So, and he was comfortable with that. Action items, and you'll recall at the last meeting we spoke about putting action items at the bottom of this, so it's just so that we don't lose sight of some of those items that were discussed in the meeting. Two key action items there. One is obviously the pecuniary interest discussion, which we're going to be holding shortly. The other one was about reviewing the bond performance. That was a question that came up when we tabled the investment report last time. There's a question mark over the actual bond performance compared to the benchmark. I just wondered, Tony, do you recall, did we get, I know we did ask that of JB, where I can't recall the outcome.
Thank you. Yes, we put a written question to JB and we came back with a very, very long answer. Two parts. One was that the bond index is perhaps not, it's a US-based index, perhaps not ideal when comparing to New Zealand, New Zealand bonds or our international bonds. And the message was that at that particular time, and I think we're talking March, there was a great amount of disruption in the market and there was a lot of risk, what they call spreads in the market. So those bonds that might have been seen to be less than AAA were discounted quite heavily, and our average is AA minus, they tell us, but even so, our portfolio of bonds, they say suffered a little bit at that point. Now it's bounced back since, and what has happened in the last 6 weeks is the value of our bonds, it's gone the other way. So the market's been very perverse. The value of our bonds is, in near terms, rallied and become quite high, whereas in March it went the other way. So long term, I think we need to keep monitoring the performance of the whole portfolio, but in particular in that month, I think it was a matter of the market. You might notice though, if you look at all the bond equity numbers for April, they're all below that actual benchmark. Particularly the offshore equities and offshore bonds.
Who answered that question? I can't remember who asked it.
So it was a question.
Well, I think it's wider than that. That's what I was going to comment, if I could. I think we need to understand bonds in general. It's a generalisation, and then we decide, are we happy with their exposure? So I think that's the question, because they behave differently than interest rates. And the government's buying a huge amount of bond at the moment, so you need to understand the Treasury, Reserve Bank sort of approach to it, how government's funding and what happens to them over time and how they trade, etc., etc. So I would actually suggest that it's more of a principle of the bond against other instruments out there, and you then decide how much exposure you want.
I think it's a very valid point in part of hopefully the bigger financial strategy review, because bonds do not behave like term deposits. They have a risk, they have a cost.
Yeah. Just capital exposure.
And normally they're considered to be low risk normally. I did check in on our bond exposure. We have 4 international bond managers, they say. And one of them was, they're quoting as averaging AA minus, but we are actually overdue a review of our portfolio manager. So I don't think it's urgent, but I think it's timely. And as we go through other reviews.
So should we add that to the
Well,
to-do list?
Yeah, to add that to the, so just
There's some clarity around that. I think we don't. As I said, well, I think we need to go back to 101 bond market.
yeah.
Understand that, and then we can build from there. So my other comment, Madam Chair, is I'd actually like to push management into we're coming up to a new year. And I really think we should be sitting on what we've talked about for some time is this quarter reporting in there. We need to push that forward. Otherwise, we're going to slack into next fourth quarter and before we've actually done it. I think we need to say what we do and do what we say. So we need to push that forward. It'll be easier, I think, because we're not, some of that timing stuff's just out of sync a little bit and we're referring on commentary, not actual hard data in front of us. So I'm going to push that forward quickly.
So I'd like to move that recommendation then with the action list 101 bonds. As Neil muttered, 007 bonds. Thank you, Councillor Horrell.
I will, for everybody else.
Thank you, Councillor McKillum. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. That takes us to the end of the General Manager Corporate Services report and takes us to number 10, which is extraordinary and urgent business, which I'm hoping there isn't any of. Awesome. I might, just before we move into public excluded, ask you all to have a good stretch. It's been a long day and we might all need a little bit of oxygen rather. And I'll ask Mel to read the reasons for moving into public excluded before we go.
And reasons for passing the resolution would be to prevent the disclosure of or use of official information for improper gain or advantage, to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations, to protect the privacy of natural persons, including that of deceased natural persons.
Thank you. Move for that, please. Thank you, Councillor Beard. Seconded by Councillor McPhail. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question? Since we're
Can I just get you to hold on?
Can you confirm that